Would you agree that we live in troubled and deceptive times? Would you agree with that? I think it's obvious. So obvious that we don't know who it is that we should believe anymore. Except we can believe what we read in the newspapers, right? Or what we read on the internet. How about on TV? You can believe all that? Oh, okay. We really need to believe what comes through Twitter. What do you know about that? I got one. We can believe the politicians. Oh yeah, there you go. It's hard to know what to believe anymore because there's so much going on out there, and some of it's just flat out not telling the truth and just plain old lies. And then when someone finally does tell the truth, then somebody else discredits that person and it throws everything. Where are we as a society without truth? We're really kind of lost. Would you also agree that evil in this day and age is more than obvious? Do you agree with that? Yeah. We can talk about violence and war. We can talk about hatred and prejudice. We can talk about abortion or abuse or injustice. And that's just the beginning of the list. We don't have to look anyplace. It just comes to us. We see it every day if we read or watch the news. And as we look at these things, it can seem that that truth is dead and that we are kind of lost in the world. The evil is about to overcome us, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's what it can seem like. And it's not the first time this has happened in the history of the world. We have two examples of where it was in the readings today. In the first reading from the book of Deuteronomy, what leads up to this passage today is that there were prophets, but they stopped prophesying what the Lord wanted and prophesied what it is that would get them what they wanted, some benefit for themselves. So they had rival prophetic groups, and one would prophesy one thing and the other didn't know which one was true, except we knew that what they were doing was for their own benefit so that they could get ahead. And in the time of Jesus, we see that evil was there too, and especially when he was in the synagogue today, a man who was possessed by an unclean and evil spirit came up and got up, right up to his face, and there it was. Evil was right there. So we know that it's not a new thing, and we can just trace it over the history of the world. It's rampant, so is deception, and there's nothing we can do about it. Unless we have a faith in the God of creation and believe that God is not powerless in the world today. God is the one who made the world in the first place. He's the one who made it. We heard it in the book of Genesis, where it says that God, in each section of creation, he says, and he looked at it and said it was good. It is very good. That the goodness of God is woven into his creation. In fact, it is woven into each one of us. There is goodness that is woven into us and needs to be lived out. We see that also in these readings where it says in the first reading, it says, I will make a prophet like you who will come before the nation. You, Moses, because you have been a man of integrity and you have spoken my word, I'm going to give somebody else to these people who speak the truth. And then Jesus, when he was faced with that evil, he looked at that. He was not overcome by evil at all, but he looked at him and said, get out of here. And he threw him out of the man who was possessed. And if we look at the history of the world, indeed, even the history of the church, from the time it started after Jesus up until now, we say, sometimes we got to admit the church has gone off track, as well as the world. But eventually, it all comes together. Remember in the time of St. Francis, that part of the problem was the hierarchy then. They liked to ride, to be on their high horse. And literally, they would ride big, high horses and wear really expensive kinds of garb and kind of walk around like this, ride around like that. And Jesus was a poor man who wore a poor man's garb. And as we all know, God said to him, "Rebuild my church." And he is one of the ones, a major one in the 13th century, who helped to rebuild God's church. God always raises up people to bring forth the truth and to work good, to cast out evil. That includes today, because God's goodness is woven into each one of us, and he wants us to live out that goodness as well. And in living out that goodness, it's like Jesus in the gospel. It said that he came there and he taught, and everybody was amazed at what he taught, and he taught with authority, and he got their attention. And then it's not just words, then he goes and he acts. And that's when he expelled that unclean, that evil spirit out of that man. It's words and it's actions. And one proves the other. And that's who we are to be. People who believe and are able to teach it, yes, and to live it out. And isn't that where the very witness of the faith becomes effective? Is when we live it out. And I liked what that old unclean spirit had to say to Jesus. "What do you want with us?" Well, that's a good question. What do you want with us? I want, Jesus says, to cast out evil and to put in good. So, I want to ask you this question. Because you believe in Jesus Christ, and because you say, as well as I, that I am following the way of Christ and I want to be like him, I'd like you to answer this question for yourself. How have you already changed some parts of your life because of what you believe? Just think about that for a minute, if you would. What has changed in your life because of what we believe? And if somebody comes up and says, "I got nothing," I'm going to kind of wonder, are you comatose? But I don't believe I don't know, I find it hard to believe that anybody who's in here would say, "Well, nothing, Jesus has never done anything, to help me change my life." I remember, just one example, I remember times recently where I've had to bite my tongue. And rightly so. You know what I mean? You ever had to do that? This means yes, this means no, okay. Have you ever had to do that? Yeah. That's a good thing. That means that the life of Christ is alive within us, and it's guiding us of what to do and what not to do, of what to say and what not to say. It's already there. And if there's going to be a difference made in this world, a good part of it's going to be because of the difference that we make in our own lives by making sure we tell the truth, even when it's difficult. And the truth about ourselves, like, yes, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. That kind of truth. Or the truth about ourselves is saying, I chose the wrong thing. I need to change what I'm doing. I need to change my choice. We need to tell the truth, and we need to live it out. What I liked today in the responsory psalm was the refrain. If today you hear his voice, Harden not your heart. God speaks to us each day. So that if, today God speaks, and if only we can hear it. Hear it that we know what he's saying to us, and hearing that we know how it is that we are to live when we make our choices. What not to do and what to do. If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts.